And so these are indeed some of my friends and folks that I love to do work with in Phoenix. And so why don't you just quick introduce yourselves and then like the ministry that you're kind of here representing. We'll start.
My name is Mary Kaech, and I lead Phoenix Refugee Connections.
My name is Bethany Priebe, and I'm with Cultivate Coffee.
I'm Chris, and I'm married to her.
Is that her ministry or your ministry?
We started it together. I also pastor Missio Dei communities.
Great. So we're thinking about the last couple of sessions, thinking about being rooted in a community, and also asking the Lord, show us. And one of the things Kit has encouraged us in is to pick a lane. We see all of these needs. It can also sometimes be overwhelming to see all of the things that are broken. And yet, as we were reminded, Dave shared with us that we are one body and that we all have different callings. And so as we're thinking about those things, I'd love to hear from y'all. How did the ministry that you're part of start, specifically thinking about recognizing a need, sensing a calling, and then stepping into that calling?
So I did not start Phoenix Refugee Connections. It was started in 2008 by a woman named Bonnie Lloyd, who was a friend of mine. She had refugee friends, and she had other friends who had refugee friends as well. And sometimes when you are walking in relationship with people who have survived persecution, that's part of the definition of a refugee, is someone who has fled persecution and war and torture. It can be very difficult. And so she was linking arms with other people, and I found this little group of like 10 people maybe in 2009 and said, oh, these are my people, because I was getting involved in volunteering with refugees and trying to mobilize my local church and wanted to learn from other people. So I linked up with them, and then eventually in 2014 finished a master's degree focusing on refugee resettlement in Phoenix. And around that time, Bonnie had to step back from leading Phoenix Refugee Connections, and I was like, I need this community for my own well-being. So I just started leading it on accident. Here we are. So people started talking more about refugees in like 2015, if you remember what was happening kind of globally and nationally at that time. And I think churches particularly were looking for a trusted voice to help guide them. Like, what is true? Who are refugees? What is this all about? How can we be useful here in Phoenix? And so we added a component called Refugee Ministry 101, which comes from Tucson Refugee Ministry. So thanks, Tucson. And so these days, our network has just grown organically by people asking to learn about refugees. So we do not directly serve refugees, but we are meant to equip and sustain Christians to walk in relationship with our refugee neighbors. So we do that by helping people learn about refugees, helping people understand God's heart for the foreigner as displayed all throughout the scriptures from beginning to end, and how he works through people on the move all the time, even right now. And then connecting people with volunteer opportunities through other organizations in the city. So trying not to reinvent the wheel, but like filling gaps that are needed to be filled. And then encouraging and nourishing those people as they serve so they don't burn out and quit.
I'm going to give the big answer, 30,000 foot view, and then she's going to give the more practical answer, because that's how we operate. She keeps me grounded. But I think Cultivate Coffee, for those who don't know, it's a coffee shop in Sunnyslope, the beautiful neighborhood in Phoenix, Arizona, Central Phoenix. And it functions like a normal coffee shop, but it's also a nonprofit, and we use it to give job and life skills training to vulnerable youth, particularly refugee teens, those who are aging out of the foster care system, and then just youth in the Sunnyslope community who are at risk for various reasons. And so it really kind of started from an combination of our personal passions and then proximity to the vulnerable. We had a passion for good coffee and for creating communal spaces. We love that. And as we were in proximity with people, it started to change the shape of what the nature of that business venture would look like. And so we were in a community with our church who was serving group homes and working with kids in the foster care system. We were also part of another community within our church who a couple in our community intentionally moved into a condominium property on 35th and Dunlap that was primarily refugees living there so that they could have proximity. And their back patio opened up to a open area, so we would just set up a table with food, bring a soccer ball, and meet families that way. And so as we were doing that, and just getting to know a lot of young people who did not have either parents who could be intentional with them, or had parents who were trying to figure out how to navigate a whole new culture, language, context, and just survive, we recognize this need to help these young people learn how to transition into adulthood more fully and holistically.
So I think the stirring in our hearts to do something like this was for 15 years of our marriage, and we would go by storefronts and dream about what it could be. And we would just get overwhelmed by the reality of cost and making all of it happen. And so finally, I think when God was ready to just push us out there, we realized we just got to find a starting point. And so Chris did some research and realized he could build a roaster. We had $2,000, and so we put that into him building a roaster and ordering some green coffee and figuring it out. And we spent a year learning to roast, and then the next year we worked with some of those group homes and started bringing the kids together to just help us package coffee. We realized that was very little job experience, but so we tried to get a trailer. God had other plans. That got stolen. God used that to help us raise about $12,000, and there was this storefront we just kept going by, and we had no business to start a business because we didn't have the experience, but God was in it, and we met the owner. He didn't ask for a background check. He didn't ask for financials. We did a handshake deal, and he let us in. In 2019, we opened up a coffee shop, and were able to start giving actual customer service experience and doing a lot of learning on the job for us and for them, but that's kind of where we started.
So good. So how are some of the ways that you've seen God at work as you stepped into this calling in and through these different ministries? I think we'll start with Mary.
Yeah, so I think, as I mentioned, our goal is to equip people in the receiving community, that's us, to welcome and receive and love our refugee and other immigrant neighbors. And when I think about how I've seen God at work, it's through watching him change people's hearts and minds. We do not try to change people's hearts and minds because I have tried that and it was a disaster. And every time I continue to try that, it continues to be a disaster. So I think our approach is more invitational, inviting people to come and learn. And there are a lot of people who want to learn and have a soft heart for that. So whenever I encounter someone who's a Christian who is kind of opposed to refugees or other immigrants, it's usually one of three things, or all three things. It's like they haven't seen the thread throughout the scriptures of God's heart for the foreigner, or they're believing something that's factually untrue about the program, like there's no vetting process, or refugees are a strain on the economy, or things like this. But the most impactful reason that I have seen is that they're not in close proximity with someone that they think they know about, but they really don't. So to the extent that we can get people face to face with people that they're afraid of and they don't know, that's when I have seen God at work the most. And that's something that humans can't do, I don't believe. But I do get to see that over and over in small ways. And I think, when we zoom out and look at problems from a high-level perspective, it feels really overwhelming and depressing. But I think that the smaller you can get and the closer you can get, it's easier to see God at work.
I think there's a lot of ways we could answer that. I'm going to answer on the gift that God has given us of space and place. We talk about like making roots and making home. And the power of Cultivate having a location has been so fruitful because we'll have kids coming and leaving and coming and leaving, and they always know where to come back. Just this week, we had our biannual health inspection, which is always very nerve-wracking and puts us on edge. And I was meeting with somebody, I saw the health inspector walk in, I was like, oh my gosh, I gotta go, here we go, and I'm walking him through this, and we get to the point where we walk out to the dumpster because he wants to see how all that is, and I'm showing him, and I turn around, and right behind me is a young man who's been walking off and on with us for about 7 years, and you could just see distress on his face, and it was not the most appropriate time or anything, but he knew where he could come and always find us, and so we got through the health inspection and was able to sit down and work through life with him. But there's just something very powerful about them knowing where they can come home to, and that's been a great way that God's been working.
Another quick story with that is even though we're employing vulnerable youth, it's a space there for the entire community. And so a couple of years ago, there was a fire at an apartment building there in Sunnyslope, and I think it was like 40 units where people just lost their homes, and it was a lower income apartment property. People they were displaced. They had nowhere to go. They didn't have things. And somebody else in the community in Sunnyslope just started telling people, hey, bring stuff to donate to these families to Cultivate. And we didn't organize that, and we just suddenly became a donation drop site that we did not sign up for to be. But it was great that they just knew that Cultivate will be a place where we can go and we can organize this because they're there for the community.
That's beautiful. So as we're thinking, we're seeing these needs, brokenness in the community, and we're hearing these invitations to discern our lane and discern God's calling for action steps. How would you encourage someone who's sensing a calling to step into ministry like you have?
Yeah, I think we've heard a lot about that already this morning, which is wonderful. I think of a few things. One is to discover what's already happening in that space. Do a lot of work to talk with people who are already working in that area and find out what they need, what are the gaps that they're experiencing, how can you come alongside them and learn from them and support what's already happening, both to keep learning yourself and to not duplicate efforts. Second, I would say kind of start small and be flexible. So it's good to have a very clear vision, as I think Kit was saying, but at the same time, be flexible about the actions that you take to get there, because there's a lot of things that are out of your control and things that change. So have a clear vision, but then how you get there will need to change. So start small and see what grows. And then the third thing I would say is kind of, I think David was talking about this earlier, is kind of embrace submission, mutual submission to one another, and fight against the natural human temptation to like have your stamp on everything, but to collaborate with other people. I think we need submission and humility in order to collaborate, and we need collaboration in order to do ministry well. So start with that and keep trying for that.
Mary stole our answers. That's great. That's beautiful. Yeah, starting small.
That's why I want him to go, because he can think fast.
I love it. Yeah, like Bethany said, we had talked and dreamt of this for like 15 years and didn't act on it. And then I don't know what it was, but something just changed. But what we learned in that process was that we could have just taken that step a lot sooner. And so I think a lot of times what we have in our heart feels like this big thing that we aren't sure how we're going to get there. But finding people who are like-minded, who are already kind of in that work and aligning with them, and then just taking, what's the seed you can plant today that'll eventually grow into that beautiful tree that feeds many people with its leaves?
I don't really have much more to add. They said it well.
Well, can we say thank you to the crew for sharing with us? Thank you.